Hello, everyone. Welcome to Anointed Lady TV, the home of news and politics. If it is your first time in this channel, you are highly welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. And if you like what we do on this channel, hit on the subscribe button. Also put on the notification bell so you'll be notified by YouTube anytime we drop a new video. And if you are returning subscribers, thank you very much for always coming back to watch our videos. On this platform, we drop videos every day and we react to every video that come our way. And on this very video, I will be watching with you. And after watching, let's go to the comment section and drop our opinion constructively. Like our videos and also share our videos if possible. See you next time in my next video.
I think there are a couple of factors. You use the word political, but I think there are a couple of factors to think about. I think it's a question of timing. And one, you're in a situation where your inflation rates are in double digits. You're looking for an increased revenue base in terms of the government trying to generate more revenue. You're facing issues around insecurity, unemployment. So I think there are a couple of factors down to the market level and even the world level that the common man is grappling with. So the question is this the right time to do it? And unfortunately, it isn't the right time. So I think some could call it political, but I think you also have to look at the timing too. The oil prices are going up at the moment, and typically some areas of opportunities are usually when oil prices are relatively lower. So yes, for the politician, they're concerned about their constituents, obviously. So yes, that's where the political angle comes in. But I think there are other additional factors around communication and the impact on the common man that you have to think about.
And how could the same government be circumventing the same law it signed? I mean, when President Buhari signed this law, the National Assembly knew that there was no provision for fuel subsidy in the new Petroleum Industry Act. The Minister of Finance knew that, the Budget Office knew that, the Presidency knew that. And how come all of these people are pretending as if they are just saying this new law, as if they never knew that this was there? Why was the finance minister prevaricating on this issue, talking so much confidently that fuel subsidy will be totally removed in June, only for her to come and say that it's no longer feasible? Is that politics?
So I think that the action to remove the fuel subsidy is a right one. The question once again goes back to timing and communication. I don't think that there was a proper extensive communication around this. And secondly, the removal of fuel subsidy should actually be in a phased approach and not just a one-time removal. So we have to learn from countries like Ghana, Brazil, and even Kenya on how did they do this. And then you find out that there was effective communication around all this. And two, this was done in a phased approach. So the approach you wanted to use was just to remove it in its entirety. And obviously that would have a ripple effect down to the common man.
I come to you, Dr. Sam Amadi. What do we now do with the Petroleum Industry Act, which is now a law? How do we foresee the government quickly sending back an amendment? Because, I mean, this is law and we just have to obey what the law says. Although the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources was saying that no law is cast in stone. But it's so unfortunate to hear that from him when he was the one, alongside the president, that sent this draft bill to the National Assembly for this same law to be passed.
Well, again, back to the point Isiche made, that's a political timing and economic timing. What this illustrates first is shoddiness. The IMF in this paper really pointed out some of the risk that we're facing now and talked about creating some kind of consensus around what to do and how. We didn't do that. So that's a failure of policy and implementation. But again, back to the law. Yes, of course. The fact that the Petroleum Industry Act talks about liberalizing the oil sector and all the various aspects of that work which the government has started does not mean necessarily that the government cannot still keep the part of that subsidy. The real problem here is budgeting. By the time you look at the Appropriation Act, by June, there are no funds remaining for this to continue. And then the issues, they're going to be reappropriation. Of course, government can send in bills, but you're right. If you're going to change your law because of flip-flop in policy implementation, a policy that you signed off clearly. The minister signed it off and said this is the time to start. They didn't have a good conversation with labor. They didn't build communication strategy around it. They didn't deal with some of the mitigating factors that IMF also talked about in terms of a more credible and targeted cash transfer and other social security support that would have maybe, and it didn't factor the inflation that's run away now. So the point then is that, look, they have to go back, and the guess is, look, they won't do this until after election, because clearly the fact that the Senate president is the one who went in and gave the first lead that this won't happen, and said the president is not in support of this, and even questioned the methodology, the fact around how much you consume, tells you that here is typical politics trumping economics, and that really we may not get to this subsidy removal until after election, and they will be kicking the ball to the next government. And if that government doesn't seize opportunity at the beginning to deal with this difficult question, not just removing the subsidy, but also creating a sense of transparency and clarity.
Before I come to Dr. Lomefo, how would you, in your own political and economic thinking, foresee an NNPC Limited that is supposed to be private, right? Paying for fuel subsidies. Does it mix?
Well, it may not mix, but in a puristic sense. But that's part of the anomaly of the structure we're building. If you look at look at the new regulatory regime. They have not yet even come clear as to the business rules, how they're going to operate. We've got appointees clear by Senate. So you might be sure that up until June or July, thereabout, there will be no NNPC functionally playing the way that the market or the law expects. So we're going to be modeling through with also incoherent policy. You have a fully liberalized, so it seems, and commercialized sector, but with government still, fixing prices. And again, if you look at what the NEC did, they said the price should come to X. There are three models. Are you going to have a model where you fix the price yourself, a model where you have a price range, a price band, or a model where the price is subject to market force? So we need clarity, and I guess we're not going to have it even up to June when the subsidy should have kicked in. So we're going to model through, and maybe down the line.
All right, and I'll come to you, Dr. Lomefo. Why do you think the Buhari administration is shifting this responsibility to the next government? I mean, a lot of persons would have thought that since this is his exit period, he should just do it and go away with it.
Oh, well, I think it's a clear failure on the part of government. Not because the government failed to remove subsidy, no, but because the government failed in dealing with the factors that actually precipitated subsidy in the first place. Let me put it this way. You see, the reasons offered for subsidy removal in Nigeria border essentially on exchange. That means they are looking at the exchange of the crude in the international market. That is one. Another reason they gave is corruption. That Nigerian oil, fuel, is being sold in the neighboring countries. Now, Nigerians are being punished, for the inability of government officials to police our borders, right? Okay. The other issue is that we don't even have labor force. Nigerian Labour Congress is dead and gone.
Well, they were already planning
one minute,
nationwide strike.
No. Listen, you see, when this issue came up earlier, there was an understanding between the Labour and the government that the Nigerian refineries will have to be fixed before subsidy will be removed. This hasn't been done, and they allowed the issue of subsidy to come up again. The point I'm trying to make is, if government had kept to the earlier bargain it had with the labor, right? Fix the refineries. That means we can now refine internally, and then the balance can now be reported. The issue of subsidy will be driven down reasonably. This has not been fixed. Now, my own position on this whole thing is that, one, there is clear failure on the part of government. There is no way you can remove the subsidy now without really bringing so much problem upon Nigerians. Do you know that up to 100 components of Nigerians' lives revolve around the issue of fuel? If
Okay,
you do that,
just
then
hold
you
on there.
suffer
Let me
seriously.
pose that question to you, Ekenem. The Minister of Finance was actually saying that the 4 refineries belonging to the nation will be fixed, and then the Dangote refinery will come on stream and all of that. Do you still believe her when she says that, considering that this government has been in power since over 6 years ago and the refineries haven't been fixed? Is it between now and next year that they will fix these refineries?
Well, first of all, we hope so, and we also pray so that that happens. I'll give you my collective background and experience. I actually worked in the refinery. I worked in the refinery for 7 years. That particular refinery was doing 450,000 barrels a day. A typical refinery has about 75% utilization, which means 75% of the time the refineries will be up, which means the other 25% will be down for shutdowns or if some level of abruptness that happens in typical refinery. In the state that I was working in, with that, there were about 31 refineries that were doing over 5 million barrels a day. So where we are, even if you add up Nigeria, the Dangote refinery and the other 3 refineries, you're just hovering with roughly over 1 million barrels a day, which tells you that you need to actually scale. So I don't think the dependence on the 4 refineries, which could be a good start. I think you need to expand beyond that and go probably into about 10, 15 refineries. If you're really aggressive, if we really have a stronger aggressive reform based on the PIA Act, then we should be talking about not just 3 refineries, but really scaling up to about 10 or 15 refineries to catch up, especially since the oil sector accounts for about 35% of Nigeria's revenue, and that a lot of that revolves around Forex.
All right. Just stay with us, Ekenem Mesiche. You're still watching the Arise interview. We'll now go on this short break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Somna Sambo, and we're still discussing the issue of the removal of the stoppage of the proposed removal of petroleum subsidies. And I still have in the studio with me Dr. Sam Amadi, who's a Rise News analyst, and Dr. Law Mefo, who is of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, and joining me now from Asaba. Also is the development and strategist and economist Ekenem Mesiche. And Ekenem, still staying with you, we have this news right now that the federal government says it is extending by 18 months the implementation of the Petroleum Industry Act because of this issue of subsidy removal or not. And this seemed to have given the government the leeway to be able to play around this subsidy issue. How do you think that the next government would fare if indeed it comes into power with this same issue of the implementation of the PIA and then the issue of fuel subsidy removal on its table?
So I think that as long as you translate, you do this in a phased approach, that's the first thing. And the second is that as long as you translate those savings from the fuel subsidy into key critical sectors in the economy around health, education, and also around infrastructure, and Nigerians can see, as long as there's transparency, where that money is actually going, I think that's the way forward. So I would think that should happen. And so even if the next administration has to grapple with this fuel subsidy, as long as this is being done in a phased approach, everybody can understand at the market level, the world level, what this really means and how it translates to a better healthcare system, better education, more infrastructure. And this will definitely help Nigeria out. And not to also mention, I want to also state this, part of that savings should also translate to even some of the obligations Nigeria has in the health sector when it comes to maternal and child health, family planning. This is some of those things that are being weighed down because of the fact that we may not necessarily have enough releases to even interject in those interventions that we're thinking about. Over.
And if you were the finance minister, what would be going through your mind right now? Because she was so confident of this position of hers that this fuel subsidy will be removed in June. She kept saying it over and over, only for the politicians to just come with their own statements. And unfortunately, she just seems to be, like what some others have termed, a victim of political power play.
A wise man and a mentor of mine, General Pat Akem Vingi, told me something. He said, feedback is always good, and feedback means that you go back to the drawing board and think through what you're trying to do. and how you can do it even better. So I think this is an opportunity for her to really, and her team, and also to really look at different elements around communication, different elements on how do you do this in a phased approach, and different elements on how to get data that translates to the fact that this amount of savings is going to go here, and Nigerians can actually see the benefit. I think she can, and then the last one also being, how do you even get the guys in the tech sector and the research institutions in the universities more involved? So we can come up with some low-cost solutions that can definitely help us out. Like I said, I worked in the refinery for 7 years. I was in the oil and gas sector for 12 years before I'm doing what I'm doing. So we have seen a lot happen. So, and I just hope that with these points I made, that she can, her and her team and the other consultants around them can really think through this and come up with an effective way of getting the message across to Nigerians in a way that they will believe and they will trust in what the government is trying to do. Over.
Come to you also, Dr. Sara Mamadi. A lot of people say her believability level is very, very low at the moment. But what will you say to the finance minister in terms of communicating better this kind of government policies and ensuring that the presidency or the federal government gets its act right before coming to the public with such very strong political and policy statements, in fact, even making it a law? Into a bill, to be passed by the National Assembly? And then do you think that this whole drama surrounding this subsidy removal or not will affect investors' confidence?
Well, I think first, let's start, we shouldn't make her a victim of all this. This is clearly politics railroading her, and then again, lack of preparation. Like Isichi said, you can't communicate yourself out of a governance problem. So you first have to fix that governance problem. And that is to say, this might actually be a good thing for them to start now lay out clearly a framework for the new NMPC. Clarity as regards figures, data, consumption level, revenue. We're doing some study now on the cost benefit of subsidy, and you don't have to have credible data as to what's going on there. So use this period to set clear on the new parameter for this industry. Now again, communication. Communication also means alignment and coherence. When government is talking about liberalizing the sector, commercializing it, and freeing government from some of the things they're doing and getting investors to come in, they should have less politicized NMPC. We see the struggle with the board constitution. The former chairman was later dropped and all that. So you need some level of coherence, clarity, and then the communication flows from a governance perspective. So you can't communicate out of a business problem. You have to fix it and then communicate well. And then ultimately also investors. Obviously, if you look at investment profile, less investment came to Nigerian oil and gas sector last year. Most of them went to other countries, competing with us, Angola, Ghana, all those places. So I think investors will be affected by flip-flopping. Maybe there's good reason to stop this implementation, but then the problem is that they should have factored all this before now. So they have to work harder to
very interesting
gain investors' confidence.
I will have to ask you that question to Isichi, but just before then, I want to come to Dr. Lome for one very critical debate that we've had is if this nation's 4 refineries should not be sold. A lot of Nigerians are saying, why would the finance minister still be mentioning the issue of repairing these refineries when people are not doing anything yet they are earning salaries in these refineries? Let's just sell them off. They are just such a big burden as national assets. What do you make of that?
I think the refineries should be sold, all of them, because they've been returning negative figures to the revenue profile of the country. That means we are still paying for the overhead, paying for salaries and so on and so forth, whereas they have not turned in a liter of fuel in a number of years now. So why don't you sell them off since they don't really exist in the real sense of the word? That is number one. Number two, I don't think that the claim on subsidy is even sacrosanct. I have my doubts.
So we should still interrogate it?
Yes, because one, we don't know how many liters of fuel of a crude we actually produce. We don't know. There are statistics that are still questionable up to now. And when it comes to our fidelity to OPEC also, I also have a problem with it. If we can go into alliance with countries that have refineries to refine our crude for us on trade by barter basis.
Well,
I do not see. No, wait a minute. This is something that needs to be really understood.
Well,
we've
tried that. We've tried that previously.
You know,
very quickly. So trying to post right now.
If it has been properly tried, we want to know why it failed. And if it's not properly tried, or it's not even being tried at all because of our fidelity to OPEC, Nigeria should consider quitting OPEC
okay. And
to be able to deal with our internal affairs.
All right, we have a very few seconds left, and I'll talk to you on that issue of investors' confidence in the Nigeria's oil and gas sector after this drama, and then should we sell or not sell all these 4 public refineries? Ekenem.
I believe we should sell them. Let the private sector. This should be private sector led and driven, and the government can sit back and so we just use the Petrobras model, but they should sell all of them.
And what does this whole drama tell about investors, confidence or no confidence in the Nigerian oil and gas industry?
So I think from an investor confidence point of view, the deregulation of the fuel markets or removal of subsidies would definitely lead to what they call increased investments. The reason why we haven't seen a lot of investments is the fact that the subsidies still exist. So it definitely hinders on investments in the sector. So if we do this in a phased approach, we'll definitely scale on our investments in the oil and gas sector.
All right.